and when they couldn't keep their 6 feet away, that they'd have to wear a mask.
Okay.
So just a lot of not sure how it's going to work.
Right. Yep.
And even with this idea that we've proposed that we think will help, that'll still take some time to get used to a new
Yes.
way we're doing things. There's no back to school night, so there's no going
Mm-hmm.
back into the building, but he's been there for 2 years, so he's more
Right.
comfortable with that. But finding the classroom and those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things can throw them
Mm-hmm.
off a lot. So
I was gonna say there's still that anxiety of finding that stuff in a new schedule of classes, and yep,
yes.
yep, yep. So is
So
all of the scheduling for classes done online?
yes, and officially they're not out, but
Okay.
if you go on, because of his IEP, we get to pick his classes
Okay.
the year before, and then the app has them on there. They're not actually listed, but if you go in anyway, there's like a back way to look for
Okay.
all the stuff, and so we've been able to see them and talk about
Good.
it, but
Good. I was gonna say that hopefully yes, for especially with having the IEP that they were helping you talk about them prior to getting there.
it's
Yes.
still,
Yeah.
we just don't know.
Yep.
But at the same time, I know they don't know either. They're
Right.
kind of
Right.
crazy, so
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's different times. So yeah. So I will let me see if I can let's go back to here. All right. So the next one that I have to share is kind of how to help kids build resilience. And this can be at any age. Resiliency, actually, I've been interested in it both in the early childhood world, but also in all ages of children. And this actually became an interest of mine when I first got switched over to early childhood, which is about almost 2.5 years ago. I paired up with Nebraska and the big flooding that went on over a year and a half ago now. They had a lot of families dealing with resiliency, dealing with losing homes, and we also had flooding going on obviously last year. And so I kind of picked that up then. And what's really cool is now because of COVID, I've really had an opportunity to do a lot of teaching on that. And so these are some things that I've found. I did find some of these from, if you've ever heard of Jones Laughlin, he wrote the book called Juggling Elephants. Um, but really what he does is he's kind of just basically teaching you some simple things that you can do as an adult, but also teach your children. And I've been kind of working on some of these with my own children, but it's also something I've been trying to teach myself, because resiliency doesn't come born. It actually is something you have to work on to build up. And obviously in a pandemic, which we are in right now, it's teaching us to be that, and it's teaching us to really think about changes. And we'll talk a little bit about what resiliency means in a little bit, but basically control the controllable. The truth is that we can only control what we think, say, and do, and how we respond to events outside of ourselves. This is really important. I've been having to do this with myself a lot. There's so much stuff out there on media, on social media. All those different places are always trying to kind of tell you what to think, what to do, how to do things, but it's really how you control it. And the things you can control. And so, even as we were talking about, like has a school made a decision, some of those things are uncontrollable. And my own children start on this upcoming Monday on the 17th. We're a 4-day school week in a small school. There's certain things that are still changing as of today, on different things of wearing masks on the bus now and different things like that. There's things I could say and do, but I realize that it's out of my control. And so I also have to teach that to my kids too, so that I don't so I don't have my attitude going to them. I need to teach them how to control the controllable. Focus on the win is another one, and I really thought this was interesting. This was a Jones Laughlin one I actually picked up on. And he says this one quite a bit on some different newsletters, things like that I am part of. And it's what's important now, stands for win. And it helps you to clarify your purpose and your priorities. And, you know, that's especially in this pandemic world, and especially with kids, sometimes they can get overwhelmed, especially if there's a lot of things going on, or if parents are talking about a lot of different things that maybe the school board is coming up with, or maybe there's lots of different rules. You know, it just depends. I know our school is doing an open house yet, but they're staggering it because we're so small with different families coming at different times based on your last name. But I know there's going to be a lot of questions when my youngest, especially going into second grade, is going to see that there's probably going to be some plexiglass stuff, and that you have to distance yourself. And so I think, like, for both her and I, you know, I'm going to teach her the win part, what's important now, and like really helping her not get overwhelmed by it, but also being comfortable asking questions about things. And then the other one is quarantine your worry. And I think this is kind of a good one because it really is true. Like, especially when we started in the COVID back in March, I'm in my office today. I get to go back to my office Tuesdays and Thursdays now, but we're still at 50% capacity. So I work remotely and I'm from home Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. But in the first month or so of the quarantine world, I worried about everything all day long, and about how I had to change my schedule and change meetings and change this. And I noticed that it was affecting my own children because they were seeing me worry, and then they worried. And then they were worried because they knew that they couldn't go back to school, and then they would have to do the Zoom meetings to do their schoolwork. And so something we've kind of started is designating that 30 minutes a day for worry time. I do that myself because then it makes me focus more on a solution to the problems. But for my kids, we do kind of talk about the worry time, or if they have issues that they're worried about, I usually kind of designate a time that we can talk about it. Most of the time, honestly, it's usually in the evenings, because then we can talk about maybe what worried them throughout the day. Or sometimes, depending on how our morning goes, I can sometimes get it done in the morning if I'm at home working remotely, and we can talk about some things that might be overwhelming them, they might be worried about. I know my oldest is kind of a worrier, like I am in a sense, and so sometimes she will internalize a lot of things. She's a sixth grader, so she's trying to figure things out, and she's kind of worried about the middle school, going from classroom to classroom, and then she knows there's going to be some different things in school because of COVID. And so we've talked about that, and that's okay. But then, you know, really something to think about is, you know, teaching them that it's not okay to worry all day long. That can obviously be very stressful. And it is hard. And when there's other things going on, like obviously the anxiety and things like that, your son has, it's hard for them not to do that, but it's also maybe a way to teach them to kind of have these 30 minutes. And it could even be more than 30 minutes. Maybe it's 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon, but kind of those times that they can worry about it, but then also teach themselves to not worry about it in the time after that 30 minutes. And to also kind of come up with those solutions to those problems. If there is, sometimes there's not. Stay connected with others. And I think this is really important. I heard you say that, like, he has been in contact with his friends, has gotten to interact maybe with his friends, and mine have as well. But that is super important in building resiliency, but also in this world that we're living in now of kind of the new normal in the new school year. Be intentional about keeping up with others, whether it's, you know, if they have a phone and they can text, or you know, I was really cautious of even giving my now going into sixth grade a phone. But, you know, when COVID hit, it was very important for her to keep up with her friends. And if I could give her time during the day and kind of monitor it a little bit per se, she was able to kind of keep in touch with them, and her mood was so much different. And so really that gives them an opportunity to talk about things. She's come back from having conversations with her friends, whether they were FaceTiming or texting, and she's like, yeah, we talked about, you know, like doing our homework online and how that was, and, you know, how we're looking forward for school to start. So it really helps them connect with others, and we're all very social, and so this is very different when we're not being able to be real social. And so just really keeping those connections. And I say that both from an aspect of for the kids to do that, because they'll probably get that time in school. I mean, there'll still be some ordinary times where they'll get to talk in the hallways, or possibly at lunch, depending on how lunch looks. But also for yourself to stay connected with others as a parent. It's really important as you're teaching your child resilience, you're also staying connected, because I think it's hard sometimes when we're in the world we're in right now, either trying to work remotely or even just trying to help our kids through things. Sometimes we put friends or spouses or even siblings on the back burner sometimes, but stay connected with others and talk about things. Coaching yourself. That's another big one. And I would say that this one, when I put it on here, is probably more for the older kids than the younger ones, because it's hard for them to understand what coaching yourself means. But really, when those negative thoughts might arise, how is this serving me? You know, is this temporary? Is this something that I can, you know, this'll pass, and hopefully this will pass. And so, you know, just giving yourself that little pep talk. I know it sounds kind of cheesy sometimes, because as I was doing this, I'm like, oh, you know, really? But in the same sense, kids need to understand that it's okay to do that, and it's okay to coach yourself and also coach your friends. And if you hear your friends being really negative, you know, say, hey, this will pass. You know, maybe by next spring we'll be kind of back to normal. You know, who knows? But this will pass. You know, and you know, asking themselves, is this something I should be negative about, or is this something maybe I can put a positive spin on? Like, hey, I get to spend some more time at home instead of having to be in school the whole time. It gives me more flexibility. So just kind of putting that different spin on things and really learning to coach yourself will help kids in the long run and help them as they go off either to college, technical school, or onto the real world, that they understand kind of how to do that, to keep that positive attitude and the build that resiliency. The kind of obvious one that sometimes is hard though too is reduce other sources of stress. And that you might think, well, maybe it's just all of this pandemic or this new school year that they're having to get used to, that is really the stress. But there might be some other stressors that either they're not wanting to talk to you about, or that you might have going on in your life. And if you can reduce those, it will definitely help in the transition to the new school year, but also in helping them build that resiliency. So just thinking a little bit about those as you go along. The other thing I put on here, these are my two girls. Like I said, I was going to show some pictures and talk a little bit about them.
Cute.
Thank you. They will rely on you. They'll rely on adults to interpret the situation, help them to recover and adapt, and then they'll watch you as role models. I really have noticed a lot, you know, we've kind of cut out the TV news, things like that a lot, because they have a lot more questions on that than if we don't necessarily watch it. Maybe we do watch, I do check Kelloland, but it's usually online or things like that throughout the day. But they will watch and be role models in what you say and do, and especially the older kids. I really thought it was probably just because I have more background in the younger children. I thought, oh, it's the little kids just picking up on what you say and do, and you know, as they get older, they kind of become themselves. But honestly, my oldest going into 6th grade has kind of, I noticed, picked up some tendencies from her dad and things like that, of different things that have been said about masks or things like that, and I'm like, oh, we got to watch. You know, we are role models at all times. And so it's really important to think about that, and to even think about, you know, maybe we don't agree with everything that the school is doing, because I know we've had some discussion about that at the dinner table, about different things going on at the school, but that we have to be role models and say, you know, hey, we're going to embrace this, we're going to do this, we're going to try it, and really be that role model. Because they really do regulate their emotions and the way they're going to handle that stressful situation, based on how you handle as an adult. And a good example would be, I guess, as Ada, my oldest here, when we did go into the quarantine world back in March, I was not taking the whole being at home well, and trying to adjust to both having a bunch of Zoom meetings myself for extension, and working full time at home, but also trying to help my kids through school. Having an education background, I thought, oh, I can do it, but it was very difficult to try to get everything balanced. And so she was internalizing a lot of the stuff, and in fact was actually not wanting to do near as much homework, and I was trying to keep up with it, but was not as great a parent as I should have been, and got an email about 2 or 3 weeks into the process. I think it was about 3 weeks into the process, that said, hey, Ada is missing a bunch of these assignments. And it really made me sit down with her more, and we had a better discussion about, okay, what's going on here, right? You told me you were working on homework. You told me you were keeping up while I was doing my meetings, but I'm getting these emails that you are missing stuff. And then we really talked about it, and she had seen me be stressed, and I didn't communicate real well how I was stressed and how I was handling it. And so she just kind of shut down as well and didn't want to say her stresses. And so she was doing work, but she was not submitting it. She was not doing all of the homework that she should have, because she thought, well, I can just do it later, and was kind of pushing it off. And so, you know, after we kind of both sat down and understood that, yes, this is not an ideal situation. This is not fun for either of us right now, but how can we make this better? And we kind of set up more of a schedule of, okay, here's when we're going to work on homework together, so we know that we're doing it together. And then this is when mom's going to do her work, and you can sit down and try to get it done. And then you can come and make sure you want me to check it before you turn it in, that's fine. But it was really kind of eye-opening to me, because I figured she would be the one that honestly would adapt better. And I think the older ones were just more watching how I was, I think she was really watching how I was reacting, and I was not reacting real well at the beginning. And so she was kind of doing what I was doing, and kind of just pushing it off, or not dealing with it as best as she could. So they do watch you. So one thing I also wanted to mention a little bit about, I know this picture is hard to read, and I can, I'll send this PowerPoint to you so you can see it more closely. But you might have seen this picture. It's been on Facebook and different places, a few places like that. I've seen it on some different websites, but it's really looking at your child in their mental health. Being that role model, like we talked about, talking to them, coping skills, well-being, self-care, even not just that self-care, even if like this school year, I know it's going to be a little bit different. I know my kids have already, well, I've heard teachers already say, and I know the kids are already worried about even like the gym and things like that. Making sure they have that self-care though, making sure that they have that time to just relax, be that kid, you know, let them go out for bike rides or go outside until the weather gets cold. Doing those things is important, and it's something we teach ourselves and try to have best self-care. So we need to make sure our own children are still doing that, even in this new world that we're living in. Autonomy, making sure they can make their own decisions, and that's important as in any age and as they get older as well too. Support relationships with friends and family. We've talked a little bit about that. Teaching them deep breathing or relaxation. I've been teaching my kids mindfulness a little bit, and if you haven't used it, it's really a good. I don't like to call it program, because it's actually just more of a self-care thing to do. But there's lots of different mindfulness activities out there on the internet. I didn't put any in here because I didn't know how long this presentation would last or how many people I would have on. But some different ones I've just done with my kids is just even doing like the 5 senses and doing some deep breathing to start out with, and then just doing like, think of 5 things you can touch, and having them close their eyes and think of those 5 things, and then like 4 things you can see, 3 things you can taste, etc. And that's just even a simple, usually takes 1 to 2 minutes depending on how long you want to think about those things and how long you want to do your deep breathing. But it really just helps them kind of calm themselves. Some other things I have utilized as well, actually my oldest daughter Ada came home right before COVID, and it came in into great use during the quarantine world, was a calming jar. And it's basically a jar, and I apologize, I was going to bring it today to my office. It's actually at home. But it's a mason jar that they filled with water and put different colored glitter in. And then they did not glue the top, but they just sealed the top with a canning lid and ring, and sealed it up really tight. And then as you shake it, you can watch the glitter go down to the bottom as it settles. You shake it and then just sit there and let the water sit in the jar, and the glitter will settle down. It is very calming. At first I was like, this is interesting. But as I sat there and actually utilized it one afternoon, because I just had a lot of Zoom meetings and a lot of interesting things happening in work, it does really calm you. And it's something very easy for kids to make, and very easy for kids to kind of self-regulate themselves if it's something that you can have on hand. I did honestly watch my daughter pick that up a few times and take it into her room, and I thought, oh, something happened on the Zoom meeting, or she's frustrated with homework because she doesn't get it. But I let her go use that, and then that was an opportunity to then like say, okay, what's going on? Or she calmed herself down enough to go try and finish her homework or whatever she needed to do. So I think it's just different things like that, or stress balls. I've seen kids using a lot of those squeezing stress balls, anything like that they can also use as kind of a outlet to help with understanding their feelings and coping with them. So resiliency, like I said, but I was going to talk about the definition. So resiliency, the definition I really like that I have found is defined as the ability to effectively cope with, recover from, or adapt to changing life situations. And the reason I really like that one is because it's coping, it's recovering, it's adapting, and it's changing. Which, if you really stop and think about that, we are in all of those worlds. We're especially now with the pandemic. I mean, we were trying to cope with it. Hopefully, eventually we'll be recovering or get through the recovery stage, and then obviously changing life situations, because it is going to change how we probably live, and we probably won't go back to the way we were less than a year ago or 6 to 8 months ago. So all right. Trying to make sure we didn't have any other participants kind of come in. Okay. Some things to talk about before sending to school. Be kind. And I think this one is super important for any age, but these 4 right here, I'm going to actually be talking to my children probably in the next couple of days before they go to school Monday next week, because the be kind is really going to be important, because I really foresee a lot of, I don't know if you want to say bullying, but picking on, because either kids will have masks or they won't. In our school, it's highly recommended, so I know there's going to be some that will and some that won't. So I think that's going to cause, there is going to be some picking on, I think, depending on what grade you're in, and hopefully not, but I'm afraid there will. But just be kind. There may be some kids that aren't allowed to come because of other health conditions in their family or because of them. There may be some situations where they can't do as much as they used to do. Maybe they are not able to do all the activities or things like that they used to do before this pandemic started. But I just say, teach them to be kind. Everybody's going through different situations, and so be kind. Basic hygiene is another thing that's pretty common, but just teaching them, I know I've had to tell my kids all the time, wash your hands, and especially at home, you sometimes don't even think about it, but we're trying it more now, because they need to be used to washing their hands if they get them, if they touch something or they get them dirty on different things. It's going to be more frequently washing their hands than they're probably used to at home if they've been at home all summer. And so just that basic hygiene. Also just, I think of my second grader, okay, you sneezed, you need to go to the bathroom and wash your hands. We've been working on that, but I'm at home, usually it's, oh, excuse you, or God bless you, and move on. But the basic hygiene of just washing your hands, especially after you sneeze or touch anything. Things will look and be different. Like I said earlier, just talking to my kids or your kids about what things might look like. And that's really hard, because everything's ever changing. And even talking to them about that, hey, you may go to school and you may have lunch a little bit different because you can't all fit into the lunchroom. You may be going to school. I know, for instance, our elementary and probably most of middle school and high school are going to have the plexiglass trifold around the desks. And so talking to them about that and how they need to respect that and to be able to stay within that confines of the plexiglass for the safety of everybody. And they may not like it, but it is something that they have to do to protect everybody, because there may be kids going home to grandparents, to parents that have compromised immune systems and things like that. They need to think about and protect everybody. So just talking about that ahead of time of what things might look like, because that might help the anxiety, that may help the questions. And like I said, I'm really actually very happy that our school is doing an open house, just because I think that might help even my second grader, who I know is going to have a bunch of questions of why is our room like this, why is things like this. It may help the anxiety of the first day jitters of being nervous about it. But even if you can kind of find out some of that stuff ahead of time, you can talk through it and kind of help them through it as well. And then physical contact and sharing. That's important, because I really think, like, my children are huggers. My children, like, they will hug teachers. They have close relationships with a lot of the elementary teachers because they've been in our school for years and years and years. So they love to come give hugs. Well, we've already had that discussion of you aren't going to be able to give a lot of hugs. You aren't going to be able to share a lot of your things. More than likely, you won't be bringing extra stuff to share in your classroom like in second grade. But even that close physical contact. We haven't done a lot with a lot of people this summer, but my youngest daughter is actually getting used to saying, "Mom, can I hug them?" And even like asking if she can hug like the grandparents. It's weird. It's very different. I'll be honest with you. Like every time she does, I'm like, oh, but it is something that it's important for them to think about that and to ask about that if they can do that, because more than likely at school they're going to be told, the physical distance, and then not to touch and things like that. And so to talk about that ahead of time so it doesn't scare them per se when they get there. Also, I wanted to put this, I really appreciate this quote, and I think that this is important in the world that we're in right now, no matter what age children we have, is really sometimes it's better to react with no reaction. I know myself as a parent, and I'm sure you as well, Monica, it's sometimes you want to react to the situation or try to take care of it, but sometimes they just want somebody to listen. And so I always have to tell myself, okay, just listen, and then we'll see if we need to react to that situation and fix it, or if it's just something that they're saying, hey, I just wanted to tell you that this happened or this is going on. And I think those situations will probably be more frequent this year because of the ever-changing world that we're going to be living in, and the possibility that we may end up going to online learning again, that we may be 2 weeks out of school and then we'll go back, but then it'll look different again. And so we really have to be open to being a good listener to our children, but also I think just remembering that sometimes we don't have to react right away, and just like listen and be there for them and help them to understand. So we do have a COVID-19 extension page that I wanted to put out here. It just says kind of the ending slide that really does have lots of different resources. There's lots of different things. There's a page on there for different activities to do at home. There's also resources on financial stuff, on food stuff, on even canning, things like that if you're doing stuff at home or gardening. All sorts of different stuff is on that page. But that's a great resource to use as we're going through this, because obviously this is not going anywhere for a while. So I wanted to throw that out there. If there is anything that you ever need, it's usually on here, or you can email or call too as well. So I'm going to stop sharing right now and see if you have any questions.
No questions. Thank you so much. I love the idea of the quarantine time. We used to do a kind of a freedom to say whatever you want time, without
Yes.
getting in trouble. And so I think bringing that kind of a thing back will be good.
Yep.
And then it was a good reminder of with the calming jar and that stress balls, because he will go through many and leave them behind everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now is probably a good time to buy some.
Yes.
So he's got a bunch of them with him.
Yep. 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 And anything like that that helps them is important. And you think about it, it's at first I thought those stress balls, I'm like, I wonder how often they get used or if they just get, set down. But now I think more and more, I think kids need that. And even just something that they can just pick up, and if it's a ball or something like that they can help through their frustrations and their stress. So, yep. And the calming jars was, I think that's a kind of a fun idea too, that you can sit down and make. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And an easy enough thing to do.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
awesome.
Awesome. Well, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to email me, reach out. I will email you this presentation as well, so you have that if you want to share it with anybody or use it. So,
okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for hopping on.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.